We are live. Thank you for joining this installment of the Dubb Action Online Summit. Today we have Duane Dufault, who's going to be talking about two topics that I'm extremely passionate about. Number one is RevOps, revenue operations, and number two is unit economics. So too many people in sales don't understand what RevOps and unit economics are, and as a result, they really can't optimize the whole pipeline. So we're going to get into that topic with an expert. So Duane, if you could start with a short bio, and then we'll just get into the topic and show some slides here.
Yeah, so I appreciate that intro there. Those two topics are definitely up for discussion a lot of the times, and it's one of those things that it's not taught in school. You can't go to college for it, and it's skills and data that you learn how to use and interpret over time. And for me, I've spent the little over a decade in sales, selling anything from toilets online, doing e-commerce sales, door-to-door printers, and I've sold into Fortune 100 companies, big, large enterprise software, very long sales cycles, and then kind of everything in between. And one of the things that I learned is that there's these metrics that you really have to pay attention to in order to know where you're going, understand the path you need to go for growth, because just because there's a big ticket item on your product, it doesn't mean that's going to cause growth to happen. So there's a lot of things on the back end that you have to monitor to understand where the growth levers are and what that costs the business in order to pull those. And so that's kind of why my topic today is kind of the RevOps side and the unit economic side behind business, and how to actually use those two in conjunction to drive growth in an organization. And so on the next slide, we'll kind of do a quick agenda. I like to know where we're going to go. And so we'll kind of cover, and all this is going to be high level too, because you can get into each one of these slides in a couple hour conversation and really dive into the details. But we're going to high overview of what RevOps really is, what unit economics is, kind of where do they fit in the business, how to impact them on a basic level, and then kind of some action items you guys can do right after this and go take them to your place of business. So RevOps in a nutshell, it's basically the end-to-end business process that drives the revenue across all departments, right? That's marketing, sales, it's expansion, renewals, everything. It's complete transparency, and it takes a lot of execution to get there. And the odd thing is everyone thinks this is a recent thing in sales and business. It's really not. It's just got a cool title, and they're throwing new roles at it. And so people think that RevOps is a dedicated role in the C-suite or the VP position at a company. And in reality, it's a mindset an entire organization has to have in order for everyone to move in the same direction. So next slide, and I'll break into that. Because revenue is the number one metric we need to be paying attention to. That's what we're all here for. That's what keeps the business alive. And it is quite challenging to have that mindset, because you have to be really good at communicating and collaborating with every single one of your departments. Like, there's a couple things that we'll cover, but product needs to be aligned with revenue. Marketing needs to understand what revenue they're producing. The support team needs to understand engineering. All of this needs to be one big giant feedback loop, which is why it's not one role. Now, on the next slide, there is some gotchas there. If you're 1,000-person organization and you have 20 different revenue streams and add-ons and these different product lines and completely different segments, it probably takes a person to really organize all of that, because you can't have a one-to-one meeting every hour of every day with all the little different department heads with all the crazy titles. And so in that instance, you probably should have someone organizing the RevOps function. But even then, it's an admin function, kind of like your sales ops guy or gal in Salesforce, organizing all the reports, structuring all the lead cadences and outreaches and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still a mindset of an organization. Everyone needs to be aligned on revenue and what it takes to get there. Product needs to understand the impact it's going to have on the organization when they release a feature. Engineering needs to understand that the bugs that they fix impact churn, which is revenue leaving the business, and so on and so forth with the different departments. So next slide. So again, we need to keep this in mind. Revenue, it's what keeps the business open. So it keeps you hiring people to fuel additional growth in every department. I've seen people not understand the hiring part of new revenue. They think that new revenue, new MRR, ARR just fuels sales hires. Well, that's what gets you your level 3 engineer to help you build that new feature when you can sell higher value deals. So it works together. And it doesn't matter if it's SMB or enterprise, revenue is the same. It's just how we go get it, which is different. But again, revenue is the number one indicator. Leading or lagging doesn't matter. It's the number one indicator of business health. And it can come from new or expansion. Again, the biggest thing there is RevOps is more of a mindset than just a role. And I know that's a hot topic in a lot of conversations recently. But that's just what it is. So with unit economics, it backs all of the revenue up. And so what I mean is that unit economics, it's the direct revenues and the cost of a business measured on a per unit basis, right? So you have to be able to measure what you're doing at the different levels to understand where you need to go and where the holes are and the different levers you can pull to grow the business. And so there's a lot of different terms, a lot of different acronyms popping up, but some of the basic and most important ones is your LTV, your CAC, your ARPU or ACV, kind of similar there, payback periods, MQL, SQL, churn, TAM, retention, a bunch of these different things we're going to cover. But I want to go into some of the more impactful ones and then kind of what we can do, like action steps to really go after them. So next slide. So let's break them down a little bit. LTV is lifetime value. If you haven't heard that, pay attention for a second. Lifetime value is basically it's the revenue that this customer brings to your business over their entire life with your organization, right? So if they're with you for 4.5 years, they're worth that 4.5 years of monthly subscription fees that they've paid to you. Most of the time, it's measured by taking your average revenue per account or your average contract value, your ACV, and timesing it by the length of time that you have. Most of the time, it's measured in ARR. So if your ARPU or your ACV is $1,200, and the average time they're with you is 4.5 years, your lifetime value is $5,400. So that's a very basic way to do that equation. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. If you're a new business, a different way to calculate LTV is by using some of your churn metrics. And there's more dividing by your ARPU and the lifetime expectancy of that company. But most of the time, it's a simple metric that you can use at the early stages of your company. Later in your organization's lifetime, you can break it down per segment, which is something that I do. I look at LTV based on different categories of business that we go after. What's the LTV of the SMB, mid, enterprise? So that way we know where we can turn the volume up and spend or throwing bodies at based on what our ratios are. And so again, with CAC, cost of acquisition or cost of acquiring a customer, or however you want to look at it, it's just what you pay to acquire a customer. Most people, the biggest mistake I've seen is most people only calculate marketing spend. They don't even look at the salaries that they pay their marketing specialists to go and build the campaigns to acquire the customer. They only look at, hey, what did I pay Google? What did I pay Facebook? And they're like, oh, we're at a 3-to-1 ratio. Yay. And it's like, that's not good because the true cost of acquisition, you need to calculate in your sales compensations, the company overhead, which is the salaries, cost of keeping the lights on, in that ratio of your LTV to CAC, which is that coveted 3-to-1 or more. And so again, if your cost of acquisition is $1,200 and your LTV is $5,400, then you have a ratio of 4.5 to 1, which is good. So you're on a good track to being a nice money earning organization. So next slide. Now it's the payback period. A lot of people forget this. They're like, yay, we make money and we make it quickly, but they end up spending too much up front and it takes them forever to get paid back for the amount that they spend. A good rule of thumb is to get payback inside of 12 months. But again, not all segments are equal. You can have a blended payback period across all different segments that you serve, but you could be having one that's outweighing another because the amount of time it takes to close that deal or the amount of retargeting ads you have to send to that to even get the lead. And so it may not be worth it because of how much time it takes for you to recoup that business, especially if you have a high churn in that segment. So if you even know that your average revenue is 5 times this other segment, if they're known or if the numbers show that they churn within 15 months because of some product limitation, that's a really bad combination. Because then you're not only spending too much, but then you're losing on the back end as well. So you got to understand your lifetime value, your cost of acquisition, and your payback period. And so go back one more slide. There we go. Then leading up to that, we have the wonderful MQL to SQL, SAL argument between sales and marketing. So you got to understand that lead scoring is super important when you're going after like paid channels as well as referrals channels and outbound channels, because one, not all leads are created equal. Again, I'll say the word segments again. Each lead from the different segments is worth a different amount when it comes to those ratios. So you got to understand what the conversion metrics are from MQL to SQL in your different segments. And you can break it down as simply as SMB, mid, and enterprise. And so just because your larger customers only converted a 3% clip, but your average revenue per account from there and your lifetime value from there is 10 times everything else, you have to understand the revenue behind that to know that that's a channel you need to go after. Just because you have a 70% conversion to, MQL to SQL, the customer in your SMB market, but your payback period is 18 months, it's really not a good mixture when you're looking at the back end numbers. That's why it's really important to understand the differences, what they do, and how they interact with each other. Next slide. The TAM, I forgot I put this in here. So total addressable market. I was having a wonderful conversation with an owner of a well-known SaaS company, and we were kind of both laughing at each other because in their specific segment of business, it's very crowded. There's a lot of customers or a lot of SaaS products in this specific category, but his organization seems to talk the loudest and have the best reputation, and they're the only bootstrap company in that space. All the other ones seem to be funded by millions of dollars, but they seem to have the most traction and the best following. And so it just led me to believe like total addressable market is TAM, T-A-M. It's starting to be a vanity metric for VC companies because they want to know how big is the market you can go after. In reality, markets are becoming so saturated. It's all about the trust that you're developing in the marketplace. So if you're not in the place that people are when it comes time to buy what you offer, all those other metrics are going to be really hard to increase or have an impact on. If all you want to do is throw money at Google or Facebook ads and expect people to come at you, there's some challenges you're going to come across because there's no trust, there's no communication, there's no education, there's no validation. So they come to you, they don't know who you are, and you just wasted all that money to send someone to your website and they don't know anything. And so the TAM part of it is you need to educate your market. You need to treat them as if they're always your customers. So that way, one, it costs less to acquire them once they come to you. And so it's more of a long arc play, but in the end, it'll reduce your cost of acquisition and it'll increase your overall lifetime value, even in the SMB world. If you have a product that services SMB, so it's all tech touch, there's not a lot of human intervention, but you do a really good job of creating that trust and that environment in your marketplace, they're going to stay with you for a lot longer because they have that trust with you. And just beating the drum for marketing there is that buyers are just more educated now. So you got to do a better job at educating them. So kind of wrapping everything up, some of the action steps right here. One, RevOps. You got to have a bi-weekly department meeting. Regardless, I meet with our head of engineering, our head of success, our head of product, our head of our marketing operations, our growth team, our CEO. We meet on a bi-weekly cadence to go over the specifics, the feedback, what's working, what's not working, what's going on in the organization, what's their perspective, what are they working on. So there's a constant feedback loop of what's happening to drive the revenue through the organization rather than having a once a month State of the Union management meeting that should have been an email. So right away, you can go back to your organization and book meetings with those other department heads and really start having that conversation. Two, this is going to sound simple, but you have no idea how many companies I've looked at, how many websites I've reviewed and audited that make it really hard to get in front of them. So number two is to address your cost of acquisition and your lifetime value. First and foremost, you got to reduce the cost that it takes for your customers to get to you by removing the friction it takes for them to get in front of you. Either make it really easy for them to start a trial if that's what you have. Like if it takes more than 2 to 3 clicks to get to your information, too much friction, and you have a huge drop off of people taking action on your website. If it's a demo, put that demo link. If it's a conversation you have with sales or a download or whatever, make it really easy for people to get to the information that you have. Don't create some weird chat loop on your website or redirects or whatever. that's just adding friction, which is just extra cost that's unnecessary. And then 3, this one's kind of different, but create a customer advisory board. When you have a CAB in place, it's going to allow you to understand what they need. It's going to provide you the feedback of what to build, how to build it, how much to charge, what's the cadence, all that stuff. Because if you're not getting feedback from your customers, you're not going to know that your marketing campaign sucked. You're not going to know that the feature you just released doesn't work, or you're not going to understand why are they churning within 8 months? Why do I have a lot of debooks after implementation's done? So you have to have some feedback loop that's not just your product team. So action steps, get a RevOps process in place where you're discussing revenue with all functions. Address your cost to acquire a customer by making it easy for them to get to you. And then 3, you got to have a feedback loop of your customers, not just your internal teams. So again, RevOps needs to start as a mindset, not just a person, and it needs to be a part of every discussion. And last but not least, unit economics. They're just metrics unless you do something with them. It's the same thing with KPIs, OKRs, SMART goals, whatever it is. They're just a speedometer. It's only going to let you know how the business is doing. If you don't use that information and take action on it, understand it, and really let it drive you forward, it's all for nothing. And you might as well not update the sheet. You muted, Ruben.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I have a couple of questions, but we're actually going to start with someone actually in the audience here from Right Price Real Estate Group. He says, in talking about costs and building trust, what do you recommend for percent of marketing budget to be directed towards gaining trust, building awareness, and lead generation? So that's sort of top of funnel arena.
Yeah. And one, you're never going to build trust by automated campaigns. Like there's no amount of marketing budget that's going to help build trust. Trust is done by human to human, and trust is built over time. And so if anything, I would enable your sales teams with the right tools and teach them how to talk to the market. It's not going to be done by just blasting people with retargeted campaigns on Facebook. But a good rule of thumb is about 20 to 30% in paid. But anything over that, then you run the risk of increasing your cost of acquisition. But the trust part is done by humans. It's done by people. You got to put a good process in place, social selling, webinars, all that stuff. But it's the time spent to give them the tools necessary to do that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. I think that having levels of personalization, building that human to human connection, I think that's key here. People want to have transparency. They want to know what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's people that are cutting the checks. It's people that are building the technology. It's people that are listening. And that connection of human beings, it's what's critical, I think, for that sale. So I always tell people, grab a Dubb account and watch what video does.
Yeah.
Watch what video does on a one-to-one basis. Watch what video does on a one-to-many basis if you're using an automated workflow. But just always have that human element. I don't care if we have Fortune 500 companies that use our software, and some of them are so personable. They're not afraid to get out there, express themselves, be vulnerable. We also have solopreneurs that are doing the same thing. I think the key is just transparency. It's storytelling. It's trust building.
Yeah. And without the trust, a lot of those other metrics don't matter because you're not going to get to some of them. And I love using video. Like I use HubSpot and a lot of different stuff that I do, and they have a really easy way to build an email or create a template and insert a video like that. And it plays, it makes it super easy. So it's, if anything, redirect some of your costs to the tools that you have for the people trying to go out there and build the trust, because it is also really friggin' hard to try to put some of that stuff together when you don't have the tools.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, we're a big proponent of HubSpot as well. We have a kind of a deep relationship with them with our video integration in our app that integrates nicely. So encourage people to get into this habit. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you really explore it, once you see the results, which is what we all want, and then all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense. I
love the response that I get. I'll get an email from somebody, and one, I don't like typing that much. I would rather just fire off a video. And so I'll get an email that needs a bunch of answers to it, and I'll just fire off a quick 45-second video that answers all their questions, and they love it. It's very personable. It's not automated. It takes the same amount of time as a voicemail, but it just requires human effort rather than funding or automation.
So well said. So where can we learn more about you, about your company? Love to connect here.
Honestly, I do the most stuff on LinkedIn. I'm the head of sales over a software company called Clockshark, and we serve the construction industries. We do a lot of different stuff for those types of companies, SMB all the way up to enterprise. My consulting email was up on the slide, but honestly, just go to LinkedIn, DM me, follow me, whatever, interact with me. I try to be as blunt and nice on there as I can. But that's the best place. Any of the socials, it's the same name, Duane Dufault. So go ahead and jump on those things, and we'll have a fun time.
Awesome. And is that an Ibanez guitar behind you? Is that what I'm saying?
No, that's a Schecter.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
You can't see the headstock.
I couldn't see the headstock. Yeah. I was trying to take a guess there.
That's a Schecter Hellraiser, and it's got the coil taps on them with the full Floyd Rose and all that stuff. And I've got a tube amp just sitting right at a screen too.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Very cool. I got a couple of guitars here as well.
Nice. Yeah, the good old pastimes.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Duane, for your time, and thank you for being on the Dubb Action Online Summit.
Appreciate it was fun. Glad we can make this happen.
Yeah, stick around for some notes. Thanks.